You know, the point is we live through and through. And I think also corporates need to understand they're not giving us anything, for God's sake.
I think that is a very important point to remember, and corporates have to keep remembering that. And they're not doing me a favor when they're doing this.
That life was, and we can't establish that fully, but at least establish the fact that we existed and we were very much part of a world, and that sexuality is nothing new, and it is not a Western import. It's not like Coca-Cola or a burger. And we already had Campa Cola.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Don't Run Into Glass, a podcast hosted by the Citizen.in. I'm Kirti.
And I'm Anika.
And Anika, what are we chatting about today?
Today we are talking about the right to love.
Okay.
We're talking about people who have just been allowed to not only just be themselves, but love whoever and however.
So thanks Noor and Sharif for joining us today, and we always take the easy way out and we get our guests to introduce themselves. So Noor, let's start with you.
Well, my name is Noor and Enayat. I am a publicist. I've been working in PR for about 18 years. I think next month will be 18 years, and I'm a queer person who volunteers with the Delhi Queer Pride. I've been volunteering with them now for about 10 years. So yeah, that's all about me.
Sharif?
Wow. That can't be it, by the way.
There is more to it, no, for sure.
We'll get into more.
You can discover it as we go along.
Well, I have a slightly longer introduction. I've been in the same industry as you've been for over 10 years, not 18. I'm a former journalist. I'm an author now. I have 2 books out.
Congratulations.
And then I'm the festival director of the Rainbow Lit Fest. And I also just very recently, it's about a month or so, that founded the Rainbow Awards for Literature and Journalism. And I'm a singer-songwriter, part-time. And so I occasionally get on stage and sing, write songs, compose with some fabulous artists. And not all are queer. There's some lovely people.
And what is the Rainbow Lit Fest about? We know about the Queer Pride Parade, but what is the Rainbow Lit Fest about? And how did you come about to start doing that?
Oh, the Rainbow Lit Fest actually took birth when we were searching for festivals that were queer-centric.
Right.
Even globally, we couldn't find very many. This is in 2019 when my first book was out, Straight to Normal, My Life as a Gay Man. And I was also sliding into depression at that time. And my editor was such a gem, Dibakar, who's a former journalist. And he says, why don't you turn all these sort of events? I was doing these small scale, 4 hours, 3 hours events and stuff about music and talk. And he just said, why don't you just turn it into a lit fest? So I said, you're crazy, that's a lot of work. And so he says, no, but you can try, you can do it. And from one day, the idea was about 1 day festival. It became a 2-day festival. And essentially it was about facilitating conversations, sort of using different forms of expression. So there's music, there's dance, there's mushairas, there's poetry and stuff like that. Panel discussions, talks, films. So all of that comes together into the festival. So it is queer and inclusive, as opposed to diversity and inclusion.
Right.
Yeah, so it's queer freaks who are including the heterosexual world.
Interesting.
Yeah.
See, this is why you need good editors, somebody who's going to take like an idea that you have and help you, sort of just push you in the right direction to make it something bigger.
Yeah. That's a damn good editor.
Yeah, they don't exist. There are not too many left.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask both of you actually, and I think Sharif, I saw one of your Instagram videos where you said that, this is again, pinkwashing, and now now is the trendy topic, talking about queer rights and queer identity. And I mean, we're guilty of that a little bit as well, because we're sort of sitting here in June and we're having this conversation. But I think there was something very important that you said in one of your videos, where you said that, you know, just sort of like paying lip service to it once in a while isn't good enough.
Yeah.
It has to be a sustained effort over a period of time. So I just want you to reflect on that a little bit more. Like, is it annoying, Noor? Even is it annoying that every June somebody's like, let's talk about this?
I don't find it that annoying, and I'll tell you what. I work with brands that do the big show at Pride Month.
Yeah.
There is a lot they're doing all across the year. When I was coming out, nobody even knew what Pride Month was.
Yeah.
15 years ago, nobody spoke about it. I say, you know what? It has to be one step at a time. So what if it's 1 month people are coming out and talking about it? When a corporate comes out and talks about it, they bring queerness to the mainstream.
Exactly, yeah.
They expose a far larger audience who never have a chance to have that conversation. To have that conversation, see queer people, hear about them. So that inclusivity, while it may be pinkwashing, and I completely agree, not maybe, very often it is pinkwashing. I say do it.
Yeah.
Look at the positive versus the negative, you weigh the benefits. At the end of the day, when we were all fighting the battle for 377 to go, right? If we had, one of the things they kept on saying, minuscule minority. Second was that, what about workplaces? Enough workplaces did come out at that time. The minute 377 was repealed for consensual homosexual sex, saying we support people. Now, imagine if that had been said 10 years before that.
And they could have, because we weren't illegal.
So that no, but
We weren't illegal as people.
That's another big thing,
Yeah,
right? When people
yeah,
keep saying it's legal to be gay, it was never illegal to be gay.
Yeah.
You were just not allowed to have sex,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
and also no third person could come and file a complaint against you.
Yeah, I mean,
It was-
unless you're inviting them to the bedroom.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
again, I mean, it was used
That's a
more
good
as a tool
step.
of
Harassment, yeah.
harassment more than anything else. The fact is, now at least, and it's after that judgment, that now at least corporates are regularly talking about queerness at the workplace.
But is it lip service, Noor? Like, I mean,
No,
you're
not necessarily.
no?
Not necessarily. For a lot of brands, it's lip service, but there's some that do
Yeah.
genuine work.
I agree, and I would, I said if from moving from lip service is really kissing me on my lips,
Oh.
and that's when you embrace,
Yeah.
you know, and just play with the tongue and do a little bit more. You know, otherwise what's happening is it's becoming like a one-night stand, which is totally fine if you want to do a one-night stand. But
But
we
you know what
live.
they say, if
No.
you have too many one-night stands with the same person, you might just be in a relationship.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like.
Younger
I don't
ones
mind
call
the lip service. Just keep doing
Younger
it.
ones
You
call
will
it
start
situationship.
believing it.
I think
Yeah.
the younger ones call it situation.
I was
ship.
just going to say
But
it's
I-
called a
but-
situation.
But you know, I have a, there are genuine corporations who are doing a ton of work, and some of them are actually now silent even in Pride Month because they're doing so many things
Through the year.
Through the year. To me, the problem arises is when corporates start appropriating Pride. Okay, and that's what happens on a regular basis because they haven't really engaged with our lives. You see, I'm not saying you have to be a freedom fighter and then, you know, sort of understand August 15th and Independence Day, but you don't want independence to go away before and after August 15th.
Yeah.
Right? And if that is the stand of corporates, then I can understand why. And not just corporates. Let's also bring in celebrities and the rest of it. Let's bring in political parties who have gone and sort of tweeted on Pride.
Have they? Have some
There some of them
yeah?
have, and then let's look at some of the also political parties who take dual stands at the same time on same-sex marriage. In Rajasthan, they oppose it, and in Karnataka, it's part of a manifesto. So that's the Congress, okay. And you have other political parties who take these sort of measures. You know, the point is we live through and through, and I think also corporates need to understand they're not giving us anything, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I think that is a very important
Yeah.
point to remember, and
Yeah.
corporates have to keep remembering that.
And
they're not doing me a favor
They're
when
not
they're
doing a
doing
favor.
this.
And you have to also, I'll just say, is you when you have these sort of statements, or you know, I've been part of closed groups while working with Open for Business. On my right, there was a very well-known Southeast Asia CEO for a large financial firm, and that person says, you know, we put up the pride flag, and I was like,
Wow.
Clap.
That's it.
They're
Yeah.
putting up the, you know, the tricolor,
Yeah.
outside your house, and you don't pay your taxes, you don't do anything, you violate women, you abuse children, and what do you say, you're a nationalist.
Nationalist, yeah.
You know, come on.
No, and I agree with
Oh,
you
come
on that,
on.
and I think that's something that has shifted.
No, in some cases.
In
but I think
actually,
we
in a
need to-
lot of
No,
cases,
but I
Sharif.
think no, but the large corporations reaching out to me, as of just 2 or 3 days ago, okay, a global American company who tells me that they're going to give me a huge audience, okay, and they're talking about it in Pride Month. They have hardly any policies in place.
So that's what I was saying.
Okay, and this is not there are many like this. So I'm don't want to generalize. There are companies who are working on ground and doing things throughout the year. You know, they're coming out with policies. Certain insurance companies coming out with policies even prior to this. They're not waiting for Pride Month to do it. They're doing it.
So one
You know?
of them, I remember when we were doing Pride earlier this year. Delhi Pride normally happens on the last Sunday of November, but because of Delhi elections,
Yeah.
we had to
Yeah.
delay it and move it to the first week of January. One of the big bank insurance agencies kept on getting in touch saying, we are launching this, we'd like to walk the Pride. And we were like, no,
Okay.
because Delhi Pride has a no corporate policy. We don't take money, we don't allow corporate participation, it's by the community, for the community. But the fact is, there is a case going on. The banks could have made a lot of this much easier for queer people. They have chosen not to, but now it's about making it cooler.
Yeah.
And you're matching up to the world. One is that.
And you're talking about the provisions of the bank towards
Nomination.
queer couples and
Yeah,
all of that,
nomination.
like the administrative process that includes that,
The
right?
same-sex
Okay.
partners.
Yeah.
But the reason I brought this up was, while that is happening, there are corporates that have had policies
Yeah.
from much before. They may not have spoken about it. They tell you when you're being inducted. I worked with a multinational a few years ago where when I joined, and this was before the 377 repealing happened, the striking down of it. And I'm very openly queer, and they very nicely, I had HR tell me that, listen, and I was seeing someone at that time, and they were like,
aren't now?
I said, I am not, I'm done with people. They're much nicer than human beings. And they sat me down and said, while legally we cannot cover your partner, globally we do. So it is fine if you have your partner as your emergency number. We will respect it. Earlier they would keep saying nomination or your emergency number had to be family
yeah.
or spouse. And then I see my new workplace, because now the laws are changing, is able to offer, in some cases, the group health insurance policy to cover if I was dating somebody.
Oh, good.
So the point is, and this was done again, not in Pride Month. This is a conversation that's been
Yeah,
happening.
true.
And this is not in Pride Month, that's not the conversation happening. Instead, what they're doing is they're doing a queer year, allowing queer businesses, smaller businesses, to come and set up stalls, earn. There are conversations around queerness, but there are conversations around queerness through the year.
So how much of lip service versus mobilization do
I
you
would say
see?
about 80% is lip service.
And how much is mobile? Because I do hear, I feel like these are wonderful stories of how I also see people who are part of this movement who are actively fighting for their own rights as champions to a larger human revolution, social revolution that is happening around. It's been happening for a long time. And now as you see the changes come through in your working life, it feels like that lip service seems to be paying off a little bit.
Yes, and that's what I was saying, that it's
Yeah.
not all that bad.
Okay.
No, I disagree. I disagree.
Please
because
educate me.
I
I
disagree.
yeah.
You see, let's understand how corporates function. Okay? And let's understand that what's the market looks like today. The demographics.
Right.
The shift is not only coming because of See, you have to acknowledge the activists working on ground for the longest time. We need to understand Pride and our lives from the context of the uprising, the lives lost, the lives were compelled and pushed into marriages.
Yeah.
Also understand, for instance, technically as per the law, I can't even give my mother blood. Okay, we don't discuss this, right? Because you just want to come to the party and celebrate it and
Yeah.
hoist the flag have a party and do all of that. We also don't understand when it comes to inclusion, and I have to say that lots of corporates are negative about it and don't want to address the issue of meritocracy, that it doesn't work in an unequal world. Okay, and that's, I think, the challenge of capitalism today across the world. But that challenge is also coming because of the youngsters. Let's not dumb down self-love and all. It's coming from that sort of population out there who's pushing the marketplace and changing it. And they're redefining how you consume, what are identities, and they also are averse to being labeled. They want to label themselves whichever way they wish to. So corporates are compelled to bring that change, because that's where also the talent is. That's where also the consumer base is. So let's understand that it is not all happening alone because corporates love us.
Yeah.
Let's understand that, because it is about numbers, which is why quite often you have to create a business case for inclusion. That is why some companies, fortunately, and some research firms have had to do the economics to show that when you include, then you have a business case and you will get better numbers. And that is very well established even by Open for Business, several other corporations and organizations across the world. But what we don't address is inclusion in all of this, because you still want people with more or less the same skill sets and education and language
Yeah.
and caste. They're all interlinked. So you cannot include in Pride Month or else or any time until you address the entry points. And I have to say that while, as Noor is saying, 80% of the companies aren't really addressing it, but I would say about 5 or 10% that I've been interacting are actually starting to relook as how they change those entry points. It's a huge challenge for corporates to do this because they failed basically with women too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And we don't address even that, because when you address that, you can address queerness too.
Yeah.
Because then you hit straight at the center of the problem of gender, gender roles, gender stereotypes.
Yeah.
And who consumes what, who wears what, and so many other things around it, of how you choose love and whether you choose to be single. We're still challenging, we still have those issues. World Economic Forum last year, I'm not a big fan of WEF anyway, but said that it will take 132 years for gender parity.
Yeah.
And that's the problem when you constantly look at equality, because you retain the position of the man generally and you compare the woman with the man. Why can't the woman just choose what she wants to be?
Yeah. In fact, we were
Right.
talking about this earlier in a slightly different form, where we were talking about, even in the queer community, there are still like sort of more normative gender roles. And Noor, maybe you want to explain that
Some
further?
people, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
No, aap bolo.
So what we were talking about, I was talking about how, so okay, I think it's very important to say, and this is something that we have to keep on reiterating, the queer movement is one of the biggest intersectional movements in the world.
True.
Right? Because a queer person's identity is not just their gender or their sexuality, it is their religion, it's their caste, it's their class, all of it makes you who you are. You can't look at it in isolation. What it does is, and I was telling Gayatri and Anika about it, was the male bodily privilege cis identifying gay men have
True.
in public spaces, and they don't realize also. So when you point it out, very often they're like, but I'm gay. And you're like, no, it doesn't matter. So ideas of consent.
No,
Consent
you
of
would, sorry,
conversation.
can I just interject? You know it. You've been involved with with DQP for the longest time. And I think you'll know the history, right? It started with women. Now, I think we should explain as to why the women are not there in the same way.
Well,
Because you're addressing that.
What is the DQP?
Delhi Queer Pride.
Delhi Queer Pride.
Okay.
Sorry.
I mean, because a large chunk of gay men
Because-
came and took over
They took
it,
over, yeah.
which they
Yeah.
do take over public spaces. I mean, okay,
Cisgender men.
cisgender,
Gender gay men.
Yeah.
because the patriarchy. It's
true, it's true.
It's very true.
I am the problem.
Yeah.
See, Noor is absolutely
It
right.
comes from a place where you don't even know you're doing it.
Yeah.
No,
Because
but I
it's
do.
not you, the cisgender patriarchal gay men.
This-
Very often don't even know that what they're doing is a problem, because in their mind, by the virtue of being queer, They are breaking gender and patriarchy norms. There's no understanding of the male privilege that they have, even bodily privilege. Women, and by women I am taking anybody who identifies as female. The minute you identify as female, you're already 2 steps behind.
Yeah.
You're already the weaker sex. I mean, I can probably thrash up any guy on the road, but the fact is the guy will still come at me because he'll think I'm a woman,
Yeah.
and therefore I'm weaker. In a public space, so after Pride every year, we do, it's been a tradition. Pride ends, everybody goes to Alka. Alka is this age-old Alka hotel in CP.
Yes,
whereby
I know that.
it's this-
Anika, you know all the CP haunts
It's got a
first
really
and
nice
foremost.
dive bar.
Yes.
And everybody goes to the dive bar. That is one night that Alka also forgets all about its straightness and Alka welcomes. Look at the people there. It is largely trans people,
Yeah.
cis women, or as I'm sorry if anybody gets offended, I cannot be politically correct because I don't know the terms, men who are more feminine. Why? Because if they go to the post-pride party done by some place, whether it's the Lalit or anywhere else, there are more chances of them being misbehaved with. Because people don't know. I've had cis gay men come and just kiss me on my lips. I don't know them to say hello, and I'm like, excuse me, but I'm gay. I'm like, still, it's called consent.
Yeah.
If I kiss a male friend, irrespective of his sexual identity, it is my choice. I choose. I don't know you. This is not a comfortable. Like, I know gay men keep touching and talking, and you're like, please stop touching me. And they're like, but I'm not doing it sexually. They don't understand that idea that sexual is not always the only thing that makes someone uncomfortable, but that also comes from the fact that
It's like an invasion
Yeah.
of private spaces. I think that is a universal thing that I feel like it should be a public service announcement. Everyone needs to understand private spaces need consent. Like you cannot.
you need consent in every
I
form.
remember
Yeah.
when we were studying in London, I remember I went to the metro. I have a problem with like body touch. Like I don't like to
Even I
be in too much close proximity. With my close friends, I will give them a nice warm hug and a kiss on the cheek. But in the metro or the London Tube or whatever, and the London Tube is very low. So
Yeah.
I would be deformed hanging in there because I do not want to, because I'm also worried. Does the other person like if I'm like slightly leaning on to them, right? And I think that needs to be a universal thing, and
So
it's.
the reason
I
I'm
do see
saying
your point,
Sagar,
yeah.
is because it's not that any of these cis men I'm talking about, majority of them don't even understand what they do. They do not mean to, but when you try and explain to them, they're unable to understand because the patriarchy and their bodily privilege in that space is so ingrained into them.
But you know, Noor, I completely agree with that point. But I know enough and more people who are aware. I want to use the word aware, not educated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
aware.
And they still don't see this. And you know, one of the reasons I put the Lit Fest together was that we facilitate these kind of conversations and we discuss these things and also intersect it with what happens in general life in society, because we consume from that society. You know, like when we're talking about gender stereotypes that play out, where I know in the case of gay men that someone who's bottom imagines that they have to do the domestic work because
Yeah.
they believe that that's the role they have to play of a woman.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've had that. I mean, till recent, you know, like about a year, 2 years ago. So you know, I think firstly, great we're having these conversations today. And you said it's guilty to do it during Pride Month. No, I agree. You've kept the mic with us. We're sharing it, and I think these kind of conversations, the point that Noor is raising, is really important. It is very disturbing when we invisibilize anyone from our community. And when I say community, we should technically say communities, and I slip up myself because there's so many groups within ourselves, you know. And as she talked about the intersections, we are doing a great disservice to ourselves as a community by sort of pushing queer femme folks out of the picture trans men, trans women out of the picture, or more so trans men. We don't discuss intersex sufficiently at all almost, yeah. We don't, there is a plus, there is a, there's the asexuals, there's the curious, there's the lesbian women. I mean, we spend so much time trying to search and find, and she's right, just very recently, I mean, with conversion therapy, women go through rape, what is called corrective rape, and it still happens.
It's still happening, yeah.
Rape happens by family members,
Family,
fathers and brothers.
so blood is not thicker than water, I just don't believe that.
I mean, let's not even get into corrective rape, it's too traumatizing
I know.
Yeah.
conversation to even have, because
Yeah.
it's just,
But difficult conversation should never be shunned. I
no,
do
we're not
believe
shunning
that,
it, but the point is, the language we're speaking in.
Right.
We're all speaking in English,
Yeah.
which a certain class, a certain privileged world understands.
Sorry, Noor, May 10th, Niti Bagh
Huh. But,
case.
yeah,
What is that?
This happened.
corrective rape just now, last month.
In Delhi,
Niti
Delhi,
Bagh.
South Delhi, Niti Bagh.
where
And
most
there's a
of the
common-
judges of the city, the most
So-
illustrious
No,
judges
really?
live
A
there.
lot
But
of this
I now
conversation
come
we
to
do
a
in
conclusion
English,
that some
right?
judges judge without knowing enough. That's why they judge.
And the fact remains, at the end of the day, while this has happened in Niti Bagh, it does happen in the cities. A large chunk of conversion therapy is also in the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities, where there is not enough conversation or education. So when the 377 judgment came out, striking down 377 for consensual sex between two adults, one of the directives by the Supreme Court was go into schools, go into workplaces, make policies, talk to people, educate people that being queer is not abnormal. This is something the Supreme Court asked for.
And zero happened,
Yeah.
Nothing is happening.
including in the press.
Including
Because the
press.
press just jumped to marriage. Like we all
That's the
met-
only discourse around it, is
Yeah, they
marriage.
just- yeah, I'm sorry. The
Yeah.
press
Reported
just
at 377.
very limited.
Then they report directly, and I'm a PR person, and I'm sorry, all my press friends, please don't hate me. But they then report directly at the time of a pride or if a case happens. The everyday conversations are not happening.
The suicide cases we've seen
Oh Lord.
should have been on front page more than just same-sex marriage, for
Every
God's sake.
second day, all of us who work and move in these circles get to know of an average of 1 to 2 suicide cases or attempts to suicide. We get messages in the middle of the night saying parents have thrown us out, we don't have a place, can someone help us? Young queer people have been thrown out of their family houses, they don't have food to eat.
Yeah. No,
I'm not even getting to the life of what trans people have. I'm talking about cis queer people. I'm not trans people. I mean, less said the better. They're treated like shit. They're treated like shit. Nobody cares about them. The fact is, nobody
Within
cares
the
about them.
community also sufficiently there isn't.
and that is one of the reasons why when we were talking about corporate support and all, corporates feel comfortable extending that lip service, because right now the conversation doesn't include, let's say, trans people and
No, and suicide and all.
And
No, no, so I
exactly.
think even trans people not. There are corporations who are hiring trans folks. They're training and skilling them. But the point is, in the larger, see, at the end of the day, a democracy works with the fourth estate.
yeah.
And when the fourth estate decides to exclude key parts of the 377 verdict of reading down, or of Nalsa, for instance, and not making state or central government accountable, or Puttuswamy, you talked about privacy in a public space, right? You're not being touched. That Puttuswamy on the privacy, it's very clear about privacy, that it is what you wear, who you are, who you love, in a public space needs to be respected. So effectively, he's also talking about consent, he's also talking about queerness, talking about being a single woman, maybe, in the context of our system and our society. So it's, we don't discuss, we should be picking up strong reference points to make people aware, and not just jumping on bandwagons. It's a huge privilege, and I'm not saying same-sex marriage or marriage equality should be denied to someone. I'm not saying it's a choice, But we need to understand that to get married, you need to be safe.
Yeah.
You need to live fearlessly. You know, you need to have education. You can't be bullied every day and traumatized every day. That the moment you step out of your home, you need to be safe in your home. You need healthcare and access to it without discrimination. You need safety and a job. You need all of those things for a marriage to happen. But why are we just jumping? It's as long, it sounds like, I'm sorry, but it sounds like journalists don't care about their children. They don't care about their future, but they keep saying so. But that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's bull. You are not focusing on core issues, you know, and that's because you just go for these easy sort of
The
things.
headlines, you know, just sort of.
No,
yeah.
headlines also created in the notion in the minds.
Yeah.
of
There's
the
an interesting thing to see here, right? You see how fashion press talks about clothes.
Yeah.
They talk about the fact, the way you dress, or what you wear, what
Body
you choose.
shaming, huh?
No, there's body shaming or
No, that's
nothing.
changing. Huh?
There is body shaming, but it's also about the fact that what you wear is a reflection of who you are.
Yeah.
And that's where queerness is completely acceptable. That's where queerness is completely acceptable and embraced.
Yeah.
Point is, it's embraced there. What about everything else? To be able to wear what I want to, also I need to be safe. I need to earn enough that I have food in my stomach and I have a roof on my head. It's very easy to say go out and express yourself. But if what I'm wearing and I go out and express myself is going to get me thrashed or raped because of my queerness, I'm sorry, I'll wear whatever is expected of me,
Whatever's safe to wear
whatever
outside.
is safe to wear.
Yeah. You know, and I think it was during these various cases on women and women rape, and I think it was Kavita Krishnan who also wrote in her book that safety is not freedom. When you have to be perpetually safe and cautious
Correct.
about everything around you, then you're not
Yeah.
free.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can understand safety in another context, right? I'm not going to put my finger into the plug point, I'm not going to jump into the fire, and all those kind of things of playing safe and being safe, etc. But safety in the general sense that every step you take, every breath you take, oh gosh, this sounds like the police, and people watching you.
Needed that
That sounds like all of society watching you.
And
yeah,
you know,
I mean like,
in a country
yeah.
like India, we're so populous, it's like the watchful eyes are everywhere. You walk out of this apartment downstairs, there are guards sitting outside, there are vendors over there. So you being under that watchful eye and to be a person that does not attract attention can be quite burdensome. And I feel like this thing about being yourself, a lot of people have played a very important part in the public realm, but I think the individual personal journeys of yourselves to not reclaim, but to own your identity, to be yourself, can also be a very powerful thing. So I do want to hear from either of you about your personal stories, about what went through your mind before you came out, you know, and or who did you feel comfortable speaking it with? What, like, that is it's not something out of curiosity. I feel like this just gives people an idea about how scared you may feel is normal.
You know. So I think number one, it's very important to remember that a lot of this comes from the position of privilege that you are coming from. To first thing, have a vocabulary to know what you're feeling. I discovered vocabulary when I got to college. I, avid reader, always had access to books. But there was no queerness in the everyday middle class Delhi world I grew up in. I didn't know what I felt. I've had boyfriends, so to speak, and it's hilarious. A lot of them are still my dear friends. We laugh because the fact is, they were just lovely human beings in the life on you. And for me, okay, that's normal. Maybe and the fact is, I don't remember half of my teenage life, but I remember some women very clearly, which now I realize why I remember them. Because I had these massive crushes on them. But I didn't have the vocabulary to express what I felt. It's finally when I got into college, there was a different kind of reading. The internet was more easily available. So you could look up things.
Really, was it easily available even with the dial-up?
No, she's not the dial-up
I
generation.
am the dial-up
Not
generation.
college.
But college we started getting that,
Yeah.
what was it called? Then college first year was dial-up.
It was dial-up, yeah.
Oh, you're so lucky.
First year college, we were not
Amazing.
looking up information on the internet. We were looking for tubes.
Dude, we're really, okay, with that generation.
And so you suddenly found language. And even then, I remember, I'm lesbian than lesbian can get. I found it easier to say I'm bisexual.
Also sounds like Freddie Mercury. He couldn't come out as gay, and even Elton John for the longest time.
Because
It was easier
there was some level of social acceptance
to buy. Yeah.
to buy, right? But for me to first find the language to say that.
But
To
when
find-
you first came out saying this to the people that you said it to, were there any weird questions that they
Oh,
ever
of course,
asked you
a lot
immediately?
of-
What? Tell me some of the funny ones at
So of
least.
Yeah,
course,
the funny
every
ones.
second dear old female friend you've known since childhood asking, are you sure you never had a crush on me? And I'm like, no, I've looked at you literally like a friend. I cannot even think of you as anything more. I still remember the most hilarious conversation I had with my grandmother, who I came out to. One of the first people actually I ever came out to was my nanny.
Wow.
Because I mean that's the one
That's a
person.
choice.
She's actually the one person I'm petrified of and yet not scared of, and who I know loves me
Unconditional.
unconditioned. I mean, there's no, I'm her person and she's my person. And that's the time when I thought I was bi. And for years when I was growing up, she and I would regularly talk about that if someday I had kids, what we'd name them. So I was having a chat with her and I was trying to explain. So her first thing was, what is bisexual? I explained it to her. And she doesn't, she's now very old, she doesn't even remember this conversation. It's seared in my brain. And so I just looked at her and I said, you're worried about Tarani and Tawfiq, because we decided that if I ever had children, whether I'd adopt or half of them all, they'd be called Tarani or Tawfiq.
Nice names though.
Yeah, Tawfiq I was forced to name, and which I'm happy about it, is because my grandfather was Tawfiq and only I had met him. He passed away before the rest of the grandchildren never really got to know him. And she's like, yeah, I'm worried. So I was like, there's adoption. And she's like, that's something you've always wanted to do. I said, there's artificial insemination. Her words were, are you a cow?
My grandmother would have said the same because she had cows. And whenever she's getting too worried that, oh my god, the milk is not coming, she's like, we must artificially inseminate them.
So my grandmother, and that line remains with me. That, are you a cow? That was her bigger worry. It was not that she understood. It was not an easy journey for her. Because she belongs to a world in a time when these were not even concepts
Yeah.
or ideas spoken about.
And I feel like it's important to be sort of respectful of that as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
years
yeah. We tend to
after that,
cancel people out.
Yeah.
She's the person who opened doors to anybody I was dating to come into their house. But still would only and still continues to only introduce them as a friend of mine. Now I can either choose to be angry about it or say, hey, this person's welcome in this home. She's making an effort. Yeah. We all have to understand people from different generations take much longer, different words.
Yeah.
My younger aunts understood my queerness much better and made bigger
Us-
face
us-
than my mother did.
Yeah.
Because she's a different generation. Your mother and my mother are 2 years apart.
Yeah.
They're a different generation. It took her much longer
yeah.
to understand. And then her fears were different. Her fear was, which took many years to get it out of her, saying, what is your thing? And her problem was, you are a very open person. You live your life on your terms. Till the day we're alive, nobody can touch you. What if you don't find someone who is as
True.
open
Same concern.
as you are? It worries me what's going to happen. Now, that's a parent's worry.
Yeah.
It had less to do with my queerness, but that's sometimes a straight person's parents' worry also.
Yeah,
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 you
yeah.
have irrational worries
Only the
and fears
universal
for your
worry
kids.
of my child will end up alone.
Yeah.
It stems from my child that will end up alone. Also, I produced a child that doesn't care a damn about what the world says. Till I'm alive, between me
And
my
because of that, they will end up alone.
But you know, it's interesting. This point. I mean, anyway, I came out at a time where I had to run to the office to use the internet. I didn't have, I couldn't afford it
Dial-up
at
also
home.
wasn't there.
And then we had excite.com as the, you know,
Yeah.
to search and all that. So it should have been a porn site. Huh? But
I thought
yeah.
I was just going to ask, what is that site?
Yeah, I
It's
never
Yeah,
heard
we
of
don't
it.
have
Sounds
Yahoo,
sounds
Google and
not
whatever.
like pre-Bing.
No, no.
Pre-Yahoo.
Much later.
Pre-Yahoo,
AOL.
Yahoo.
AOL.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is before Orkut and whatever. So, but anyway, but that's I won't
Hey
even
man,
get
one
into that.
second. Let's take a moment. Orkut was a thing, okay, guys? Like,
Yeah.
Orkut was a video
Facebook,
social
please move
media.
aside. Orkut was a thing.
We are the opposite
9
generation.
photographs.
No, I
alive.
never used Orkut, but anyway, huh?
Yeah, it was like literally 9 photos that you could put.
Yeah, and you can keep
you used
changing
to
the
write
9 photos, but
testimonials
9.
for each other, which
Yeah.
were all complete, I don't even know.
Rubbish.
Yeah, rubbish. But
No,
anyway.
I never used it, huh? But anyway, yeah. No, but the point, you know, of this universal thing is it's interesting. At some point when my mom, I mean, we had an open house, and that became sort of a safe space for a lot of queer folks to come, and we used to have these open parties. We used to have people, not called gate crashers, but someone had met someone at Nehru Park after cruising, and they said, hey, come to this party, and I'll be joining them. Like, I don't know who's entering the house. And so we didn't think of safety in that sense, like how you think of it today. But over the years, like I came out to actually journalists first, my boss. And I was lucky, M.K. Venu and his wife Chitra. And I just felt safe. And there was no drama. They didn't ask me about anything. They actually, I didn't even come out in the way. I just said that, you know, I go to NAS Foundation on Saturday. I go for these Hamrahi meetings. Oh, you go there? Do you know Anjali? Was the first reaction. Have you met Salim? You tell Salim that, you know, you're our friend. And this is Salim Kidwai, you know, who's no more. And so that was the kind of conversation. But coming to this point about the universal thing about being alone, there was a point where my mom, after seeing all the friends I had, and the relationships didn't work out for various reasons, more to do with society than actually either my partner or my boyfriend or me, she felt that I'm safe and I have enough of people around me, you know, and I have enough interests to keep me occupied, and so what we'd call chosen family. And but there is a point now, as she says, her age is, she's 82 plus, and after attending a gay marriage and an engagement of very close friends where she was the special lady out there, she started imagining that for me, you know. And so yeah, it does come to that thing is there. But I think sometimes also parents can realize that you don't necessarily need someone, you know, and you have sort of an open home, you have a mixed set of people, and which is,
The evolution for my family.
Yeah.
You understand that I don't need to be in a
and that's actually the evolution for society.
So
Yeah.
my home is an open space. It's a safe space for women, for queer people. I have a wonderfully big chosen family that I'm very grateful for every day.
Oh yeah,
Very, very grateful for it.
I don't think I would
Grateful
be.
for the fact that whatever happens, there are going to be people who care about me for who I am.
And I'm grateful for,
And they care about my family.
Yeah.
not around.
you know when we talk about pride and things like that, and I mentioned Salim, I'll mention Ruth, because Same-Sex Love in India as a book was part of the evidence on, you know, on the 377 case. But I think a lot of us have to be, I'm very lucky that I have a great friend in Anjali Gopalan. She's not friend, I don't know even what to call her. I'd do anything for her, and I feel that while my mom has been just incredible, you know, irrespective of pre-377, post-377, and my brothers and, you know, extended family and friends, we need to remember people who took that step,
The first step.
those first steps. I mean, there was Siddharth Gautam earlier, and that petition was thrown out in the 90s. But I think we have to acknowledge and remember people who've gone and stood up and fought battles that we weren't able to, or we were too scared to do so, even if we had access, privilege, etc., whatever else. There are many activists still working the lawyers in the courts, um, and you know, again, to people who are querying conversations today, writers. There are some very good script writers. There are beautiful short films being made. There are people like Neeraj Churi, Lotus Visual Productions, who are perpetually funding queer content that goes out in video, knowing full well how powerful video is. You know, in the petitions and on the marriage equality petitions, we were talking about chosen family, Rituparna, and a whole group of folks, Chayan, Chayanika, and all, who put in this petition which recognizes chosen family.
Can you tell a little bit more about this? Yeah.
Petition or the chosen family area?
Both. Like,
So there
talk
is-
about the chosen family and then lead into
So
the.
chosen family. So a lot of queer people, a majority of queer people, very often have an experience where your family gets rid of you. They don't want to have anything. And then as you move along, you make. And chosen families are actually even for straight people.
Yeah.
Right? Your closest friends, who you consider family, is a chosen family.
It's the few choices you can make, because when you're born into caste, class, religion, everything.
And your friends, now, when
true.
I am a cis-het life, while I may have a chosen family, I have, from whether I have the right to marry, to leave my partner or my spouse or my sibling has a right to what I've earned, you know, and who can take medical decisions for me. It has to be someone who's blood relative, either blood or spousal relative. A lot of queer people don't have that. They have their chosen family. So what that fight is about is saying, recognize this chosen family of mine. As simple as that. When I worked all my life, when I go, it is my choice whether whatever is mine, I would want to leave to a sibling, a cousin, or I'd want to leave it to my two closest friends and their children. Because they have been there for me more. The fact is, even if I make a will and leave it to them, my blood relatives can fight it and take it to court, and they will get access to it.
Khoon ka badla khoon.
Literally.
Yeah.
So the point
It's
is,
true.
my
With
family
the
may have
rising water levels,
Yeah.
I don't know why we think blood is thicker than water.
my birth family may have abandoned me, but they still have that right, or to take a decision in a medical emergency. If I'm estranged with my family and I need medical treatment, my chosen family should be the ones making that decision for me, because they know whether I want to be put on a ventilator or otherwise, right?
It comes up many times.
It is them who know what I want.
Yeah.
Not my brother necessarily. I mean, and I have a good relationship with my family just for the rest. I don't want them panicking. But the fact remains, I would still give a medical power of attorney to two of my closest friends, because I have had those
Conversations, yeah.
conversations with them.
No, but Noor, you're right, you know, because, I mean, in my case, it's slightly different. I mean, I'm in almost my mid-50s. All my relatives who are the closest to me, like, are my mom's generation. And I'm just actually, as of just yesterday, day before, I was exchanging messages with Nitin Mantri, who you know, whether he'll be the person who can execute my living will. That tomorrow, I mean, I have a boyfriend.
This is a lawyer.
No, Nitin Mantri is in the same.
He's the
See,
PR professional.
yeah, but he's my childhood buddy. He's the greatest friend I think anyone could have. He and his wife Rachna, and obviously Venu and Chitra and all. But as my lawyer says, look for someone younger, you know. And I'll be without a family, and we don't discuss this even in the case of heterosexual folks. I don't. And my eldest brother's in the U.S. He's not going to fly down to take a decision for me here in a hospital. So I have to create a living will. We don't discuss living wills sufficiently. It's new, you know. And then again, it's a conversation of privileged people like me who know about it and have access to a lawyer and can perhaps pay the lawyer to do that. And you know, there are these sort of realities where you turn to people who are equal to what a family should be. And I think Nivedita Menon, in Seeing Like a Feminist, explains what family is. And so she was very clear that you cannot limit the idea of family to blood relatives.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. This applies even to.
Yeah, but we
Yeah.
don't discuss it.
We
you
don't
know.
discuss it.
And
Out of my close group, 80% are straight people. They're not queer. Because when we became friends, they didn't care if I was queer and I didn't care if they were straight.
and there were 20 other things that you were interested in.
Yeah.
And
Common.
one couple out of them, I still remember in 2020, and they're really one of my dearest friends. After the first lockdown opened, they came over one evening and we were just so happy to see each other. We hadn't seen each other. And they both just looked at me and said, find us a house here in the same colony you live in. Because you know what? If something happens to you, or if something happens to your mom and all, you'll be all alone. They chose to uproot their life, where they lived, to be right in front. And we were lucky we found an apartment, not only within a few days, we found an apartment bang opposite my house.
Wow.
It's just luck. But that thought,
Yeah.
they were making that decision because they wanted me not to be alone.
And I
Now,
think
isn't that more than any sibling will do? I mean, let's be real. A sibling may not do
But
it.
I think, Noor, you've touched on a very important point. I think in this world, one issue, the upside of identity politics and of, is sense of belonging, is also to state and get people to understand that you're different in so many ways, okay, and when it comes to your sexuality. But the downside is when you look at everyone's identity only from their sexuality. And it's when you look at everyone in the case of, let's say, religious minorities, in the context of, let's say, depending which part of the world you are, whether you wear the cross or whether you have a, Mangal Sutra or you have, what's that?
Sindhu.
Yeah, and this, and the topi and all that stuff. When you limit everyone to that, you've already removed humanity, because they have values, they have tastes, they have interests, they have so many other things, they have views, etc. We've forgotten that. And today, what the point you just made, those friends are friends because it wasn't limited to your sexuality.
It
who you
was
sleep with or
irrelevant.
who
It
you
was
love.
about
Values and so many other
you
things about
matter
you,
to
no?
us. We worry for you.
Yeah.
We need to be close. And when I travel, I have an old mother and grandmother at home. I can travel without anybody because I know they're there. I know if something happens, both of them will leave whatever they're doing. And we live in the same complex. I mean, I think we met day for yesterday after a month. Because we all have our lives, we're all working professionals. We don't have the time to meet each other. But knowing you're a call away, right? That is my chosen family. I would want them to make a medical decision for me. Then say, I'm being unfair to my brother, but then my brother, who may not know that I don't want to be on a ventilator if something happens to me.
And what was the
Exactly
position?
what I told my boyfriend 3 days ago. That I said,
No, it's true.
इससे
And
वो
I.
decision मैं नहीं ले सकता
No,
हूँ।
and there's also this.
ऐसे चलो ठीक है, नितिन को मैं लगा दूँ उसमें।
Who's
से
Nitin is
पूछ के।
another friend.
Nitin's my childhood buddy.
Ah, okay, yeah.
So these things really matter. And for queer people, making these friendships are literally what let them thrive. It's what makes us thrive, makes us feel alive, makes us be able to take on the world. That you have someone who loves you just for who you are, the human being, the person, irrespective of who you love, who you think you are, they love you for your being. And I think that is probably the most beautiful part of queerness. Because we see that a lot. You see queer couples who have separated but continue to remain best of friends for years, are each other's family, because you share a bond of a chosen family.
That's exactly like in that petition, what Rituparna's like public statement, she says that as much as she's been 4 years with Amrita,
Yeah.
and but she says, 4 साल हो गए, and it's a cute couple, and she said it very clearly that my chosen family has certain sort of rights. They've been with me for such a long time. Why can't I decide and involve them in so many other decisions, but instead of only weighing it down to Amrita? It had nothing to do with how much she loves Amrita or how little she, it is no question of little. But it was just about the fact
That is her chosen family.
that's her family who's been with her. And you know, so you sort of broaden the scope. I think
My closest friend.
I think what queerness does is can bring love to society and take it out of queerness, take queerness out of the whole aspect of only sexuality. It's about breaking down these constructs that have been calcified over decades and centuries or whatever. It is about, I think like Anish recently said, when you're looking at the whole aspect of queerness, you're opening the world to love. So we're talking intercaste, interreligion, you know, we're talking disabilities, we're talking about so many things that can be. So I think those who fear this and have these phobias is fear losing power
Yeah.
and control. That's it. And they don't want to admit to that. And perhaps because they can't imagine a world different from the ones they've sort of followed.
Let's also not forget another thing, Sharif.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the idea of family, blood, are also concepts that are very deeply rooted in patriarchy. The minute you
And banking and insurance,
And,
which are
and
governed by
capitalism.
men,
Administrative processes.
which with men mostly.
फॉर्म तो अभी प्रिंट हो गया है.
हाँ, अब तो मैं क्या करूँ? हाँ, spouse नहीं है अच्छा।
Spouse नहीं, वही है ना कि आपका because तो आपका inheritance law भी वहीं से आता है, decision laws भी वहीं से आते हैं. Now the minute you allow someone's chosen family to be making those decisions,
कैसे?
कैसे? Because आप वो सारे जो existing setups हैं उनको तोड़ रहे हैं.
Exactly.
Like in India, women still don't have a claim of agricultural land. I mean, we're in 2023, and you have laws in India that protect the inheritance of the male heir
Yeah.
over a woman's inheritance, even in the same family.
Nepal is better that
My
way.
closest friend in the world, he is my ex-partner from years ago. I think we dated, actually this year, we dated lesser than we've known each other's friends.
Oh.
One of my closest friends, my 1 a.m. call, I'm her 1 a.m. call. But I know that if God forbid something happens, she will walk in there and make the decision that's right for me. But that's not my partner.
See, you know,
But she's my family and I'm her family. We're each other's family. We're in that essence of what we call family. And that's what matters.
Yeah. You know, I think you brought up an interesting point about the right to love, and how this particular sense of identity normalization is bringing on another paradigm of love to the picture, right? Now, I want to talk about morality a little bit. I want to go back a little bit in history, right? And how, in my observation, and I come from the field of archaeology and history, we studied history honors in LSR together, and having sort of done a cross-cultural, just an observation, especially in Asia, I came to understand that morality was brought in a lot much later. Yes, there were certain standards of public appearances, private appearances, but in terms of how, for example, in India, clothing, when did the blouse come in? That's a question.
Brits.
And there is a time to it, right?
Yes, yes.
In Japan.
To enter the clubs and
In Japan, Okinawa, the sort of slightly Hawaiian islands below Japan, they're the best pearls that come out of there. So the women used to go fishing for pearls, but they never wore a top. They just wore the bottom fins. But they had to as soon as the American base was set up over there, right? So morality came and put in a layer of what was the new normal. And this new normal is not too way back in history. It's not.
Yeah, it's Victorian morality.
It's not only just British, it is
Not just
also
Victorian. There are changes as each time we were conquered by somebody, they brought in a certain set of their ideas of what it was. I mean, as controversial as it may sound, but the minute our oral traditions started getting written down, That's the minute morality came in.
Yeah,
Because you suddenly started codifying what were
you
just...
start prescribing. That's the thing about Indian writing, right? It's not historic writing, it's prescriptive writing.
Yeah.
And yes, my question regarding this thing of morality, it feels like human society progresses a certain way and embraces a certain amount of freedom and intellectual, a certain amount of intellectual presence, and then it rejigged its system again. And then a new code came into the picture. And now that code has imposed a lot of like sort of systems upon people that do not sort of account for the various kinds of people that are there. Like for example, in a Zanana, trans people played a very important role, and then suddenly they are invisible to society as to much after the Mughal rule.
You have to study history. You know how high up trans people were within ministries, within armies.
They're some of the most formidable
But my
spies.
guys, I have one sort of this thing whenever and I agree, and I've read that as well, that not just trans people, in fact, that if you go into the villages of India and you look at gay couples, right, who would, when you ask them if they identify as gay, they'd say no, because actually like these terms are also like a a construct.
Correct.
The fact was that you didn't necessarily have terms for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People were accepted for who they were.
And fluid.
And they were
Perhaps
fluid.
That's
They were
a
perhaps
fluidity of life.
Also, this need to term people's sexuality, put them in a box, are not constructs that were here. They are foreign constructs that were brought in.
But my question is, are we sort of maybe romanticizing what was here? Because I don't know what was here,
I mean,
and there is a danger
Yeah,
of
no,
doing
see,
that.
there is, see, you know, yeah, same-sex love in India, but the thing is, you're right. I mean, we can't romanticize, but we have to acknowledge that there was a presence in public life,
Yeah.
and there was a history. What that history was is as much as the debate on whether we should have as much Mughal history in our textbooks or not.
Yeah.
Because the argument from some historians is that there isn't enough documentation beyond a certain period in time, which is why it may appear disproportionate. But let's also keep in mind that in this region, and I don't talk about us being conquered because I don't know what us was,
Yeah.
right? In the subcontinent region, we've had, according to historians who've been relatively sort of balanced, perhaps, or neutral, or even if you talk about cultural historians like Alka Pandey, she talks about the Mughal period in this region as a very free period, a time where pleasure mattered, choice mattered, lust mattered, love mattered, and perhaps that explains why also you had some great poets and great literature and writing from that period.
Yeah.
But we also, when we go prior to that, we don't seem to have much out there other than perhaps references to certain temples or references in mythology. So, you know, that's not there. So we don't know how dignified that life was, you know, and we can't establish that fully, but at least establish the fact that we existed.
Yeah.
And we were very much part of a world, and that sexuality is nothing new, and it is not a Western import. It's not like Coca-Cola
Yeah.
or burger. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we already had Campa Cola. Yeah. But the formula they'll say would have come from the West, and हमारा संस्कार को खत्म कर लिया इसलिए Campa Cola में मर गया. So they might even say that. But those arguments are ridiculous and silly, and they have no context of truth. If it's a mindset, then we need to also understand that, like Ruth and Salim would say, homophobia has been imported. Homosexuality hasn't, nor is queerness. Okay, and when you were talking about Asia, I think let's understand that there were certain countries which were not exposed to the West the same way, like Thailand, for example, and you have a lot of androgynous sort of representation. But with globalization,
That's changing, yeah.
So the other view is that colonization was one thing, globalization is another form.
Correct.
Where they tell you what your breakfast should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the good
I mean, I did it in Thai. I was
Comments made by the judges when the 377 law was being struck down was that it's a Judeo-Christian law
Yeah.
that was brought in.
True.
We adopted the IPC out of the British laws that existed.
And that's there in certain other countries?
It's there in most of the colonies where they left, which became Commonwealth nations, took on the law. Because actually, it's in its essence, and this is a historical problem, it's a Judeo-Christian law.
Yeah.
And that makes a very big difference, right? That law, and it's very specific to, because in Christianity, sodomy is a sin.
Exactly. It's worded exactly like that.
That's what.
Yeah.
Against the law of nature.
Yeah.
And again, in English language, there's no opposite to
Unnatural
sin.
acts. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no opposite to sin. True.
So it's
So it's
interesting
not bada
that
paap.
this,
Yeah.
you have enough depictions in mythology, in Indian mythology, actually if you read, of trans people, of same-sex love, gender fluidity,
Including gods.
including gods.
Yeah,
I mean, I would just don't want to even get into those stories because then, they may just kill you and me, and I don't want to say that. And
No, I
once
did say it
actually,
on TV. I did.
you can say it, I refuse to risk myself with it. I mean, I do like living.
No, I just said अगर शिखंडी भी वैसे आया है, अगर कृष्णा भी वैसे आया है, और अगर विष्णु से भी वैसे आया है, तो फिर हमारा माइथोलॉजी क्यों आप वेस्टर्न बना रहे हो?
अर्धनारीश्वर कहाँ से आए?
हाँ, ये आप क्यों कर रहे हो ऐसे नहीं?
Yeah.
हमारी
Because our culture actually hasn't looked at things as binaries as much as the
Never.
West has. So you could embody several sexualities or sexual orientations.
we also didn't have left and right, for
Yeah.
God's sake. Huh.
I mean, and one of the most interesting
What you
aspects
could do with
of
left and right hand was
like private property didn't exist in India. You had multiple claimants on one piece of land, and when the Brits came, they couldn't understand that. How can 30 people own that same land? One has tilling rights, one has
children
ownership
used to be brought
rights.
up by communities also.
Yeah.
I have friends from some of the northeastern states where they've been brought up in a full community, and in fact the parents don't seem to be as important to them as someone else or
Yeah.
the community. True. And so that still exists. And
And that's how children should be raised, actually, because
and
it
what-
does take a village.
Yeah. And also Rituparna was saying, for instance, these notions that are decided out of, let's say, a Delhi or a Bombay or wherever on marriage, for instance. She says, where she comes from, she's an indigenous queer, feminist lady. She is very clear that marriage actually is not that important from where they come from. And she's had battles within the family, etc. And it's that same village which knows very little about queerness and the queer relationship who came out and protected her.
Yeah.
Now just imagine, would that happen in South Delhi that easily? I'm not sure.
Only your chosen family will come to
Only
your.
a chosen family. But see,
To your
that's
rescue.
the interesting thing,
Yeah.
right? We tend to look at a lot of this from the urban metro.
Yes.
Do not know what's happening in the
Very colonized Delhi.
totally. In the inside, there is a positive to it, there is a negative to it. I think it's important that conversation has to continue.
Yeah, and the good thing for the times that we live in, while we may not have an eye into other places, but whatever is out there in the internet universe, that is for everyone to see, right? So the conversations can keep going on. But I wanted to ask you one thing. Now, India has come a long way where the laws are concerned. I was surprised, to be honest, when the decriminalization happened. I was surprised that happened in India. Please check me if I'm thinking about this the wrong way, but given the conservative nature of this large population that we have, everyone has so many differing opinions. When it did happen, I felt really good about India at that particular point in time. I was like, yes, now this is like just the opening of the Pandora's box. Now everything will and should be talked about, right? But that's my opinion, and I am tone deaf. I don't know enough about these matters. No matter how much I try and find out, I feel like I do not know enough. So how do you see what is happening in India for people, for the right to love, like in general?
And I think I want you guys to give a slightly theoretical, even open-ended answer, because we're running out of time. So this will also be your concluding message.
Do you want to start?
Why don't you?
See, I mean, let's understand that India is too diverse to to sort of suggest that everything is changing collectively everywhere. And I think we need to understand that at the end of the day, it's people who are fighting who are bringing that change. And we have to also understand that we don't have a legislative system that is supportive of love. Otherwise, we would have had the parliament, we would have different legislatures across states responding before courts, responding to people rather than responding to court orders. And I think we need to acknowledge the fact that as much as sometimes we're really upset with some of the verdicts from courts, it's courts that have saved us. And you talk 377 milestone movement because at least we were legitimized to a certain extent.
Our love was legitimized.
Yeah.
I say our love was legitimized.
Yeah, our love and was legitimized. Yeah, I think that's, and also a sense of identity and self, etc., to a certain extent. But through that, and in Nalsa earlier in 2014, in the case of trans rights, we've had the Chennai High Court come forth and ban conversion therapy.
And
Also,
speak about chosen families.
yeah, and also we had judges setting examples of going to mental health experts who were queer affirmative. You've had the Chennai High Court again, I think in the case of a trans individual marrying a cishet person. So marriage had actually happened before these petitions. You've had courts across the country supporting live-in relationships of queer individuals, going against family, if I have to use that language. So I'm optimistic about these changes. But where I'm disturbed is how inclusive are these conversations, how inclusive is the representation in the press, in cinema, and all of that, and who's holding the mic while speaking about these things, and whether we are listening sufficiently to people across this nation who have different sort of choices and ideas of what queer is, and also whether parents are starting to learn to listen to their children and not becoming dictatorial and continuing to be dictatorial people who refuse to listen and to understand the fact that a child might have or might have realized their sexuality long before you understand any of it. And it is scientifically also proven, for instance, gender dysphoria, or a person who identifies as trans or call themselves they, or as a pronoun, recognizes and knows their sexuality much earlier before a gay and a lesbian person. And I'm just that whole aspect of whether we are listening enough, and parents in particular, because I think parents can bring change, because a lot of the change can come from families.
For sure.
So I think, all I'm going to say is that these have been battles that have been going on for years. The reason one has won at every step, there was a 2009 judgment by the High Court, and I still remember
That's a written one.
and someone I was dating then called me while I was at work, and I set up to smoke, just keep screaming, saying, "Hum jeet gaye," and I'm like, "Kya jeete?" I was, and then she told me all about the case and the fact that the High Court had struck down 377. And then there was the rage we felt in 2013, when it was reinstated by the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And within 2 days there was an Nalsar judgment. Within 2 days, and where they said that there has no repercussions on 377. So we've dealt with that rage, and then we've dealt with the joy when you won again. So the curative petition. It's been a very long wait. The curative petition result came out in 2018. 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
We all waited, saying, when is it going to be heard? When is it going to be heard? The battle never stops. It's not that you won one step and that's enough. You have to keep fighting, and the way to fight, because all these changes also happened, was because you kept on talking about it. Talking to your help, talking to people at work, talking to your parents, talking to your friends. Conversation has to go on, because when that conversation goes on, does it go to more people?
And that's the beauty of a democracy.
That chup karwa ke bhi to chup nahi karwa sakte. My queerness is known to the lady who takes care of my house. My queerness is known to my driver. I haven't hidden it from them. And they don't care. All they care about is you are our person. We love you for who you are. We are standing guard so nobody can mess with you. Because for them, I am their person. And I've told them because I don't want anybody else coming and telling them something. I've told them because I don't want her to feel uncomfortable if she's alone in the house with me. As simple as that. The fact is that I'm having that conversation with her, which means she's having that conversation with 4 other people. Eventually she's talking about it. Recently somebody in the complex tried to subtly ask her, since my didi shadi kyun nahi karti hai?
They're always those little
That's
Great
the
question.
always
side
question,
jabs.
yeah.
Side jab.
And it's always asked like that, you
And
know?
she-
Yeah.
I said, आपको पूछना आपको
You know
पूछना,
what I
मैं
call
बोला मार
this?
खाऊंगी.
You know
And I told her, सर अगले दिन जाके बोलो केस चल रहा है ना. तो एक बार हो जाए ना तो बहुत धमाके. She went and told them. उसने बोला केस चल रहा है. हो जाए तो दीदी बहुत बड़ी धमाके की शादी करेगी.
मैं भी आऊँगा.
खुद से कर रही
कोई
है.
नहीं यार.
मैं अपनी बिल्लियों से करूँगी कि भैया मेरे.
That's okay, yeah. People can now marry themselves. People marry trees, marry
They've
dogs.
been married trees and dogs for much longer.
Yeah, marrying trees was
Age old.
age
Yeah.
old. Yeah, it was acceptable before marrying anything else is acceptable. Yeah, it's very acceptable.
So he's also a little.
He's human tree, that was the actual.
Okay, guys. On that note, unfortunately, we have to end this conversation. But it's actually was a very enlightening conversation even for me, because you're right. As somebody who's in the media and even just generally, we do sort of focus on the more like for instance the same-sex marriage aspect of it or whatever, and we're not really having enough conversations about like acceptance and tolerance and love and things that actually everyone can relate to a lot easier,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word.
We're victims of the larger headlines. The smaller
The
stories.
headlines,
yeah.
man.
The
The
small
headlines.
stories that
Smaller
just.
stories.
Yeah.
It's the stories on page 2 and page 6.
Yeah.
That
Stories
matter.
that don't even make it.
Yeah, and the stories
So
that
the
don't make
media has
it.
become size queens.
Yeah.
Bigger story, smaller
Biggest
story.
story, smallest story.
हाँ,
Okay,
छोटे
thank
छोटे
you all
घर,
for
बड़े
tuning
घर.
in. We'll catch you next time.